Welcome to the EntreEdTalk podcast. We are your hosts, Toy Hirschman and
Laura McCall.
Join us as we dive into incredible stories from inspiring entrepreneurs around the world.
Whether you are an educator looking for ideas to engage students, a new learner, or someone who wants to be inspired, our guest journeys and their ideas will give you resources to create value and take your own leap into entrepreneurship.
We are so looking forward to sharing our message with you.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the EntreEdTalk podcast on whatever platform you listen.
Hi, and welcome to the EntreEdTalk podcast. We are so excited and happy to talk with Van Sheets, businessman and entrepreneur. Van serves as board member, consultant, and advisor to businesses in various industries and to diverse social enterprises addressing education and poverty. He's been a successful CEO of diverse organizations, including an international petrochemical firm, a national building controls contractor, smaller firms in business services, especially retail, startups in energy management systems and online wholesale, and a nonprofit early education for economically disadvantaged children. His career has been based in Dallas, San Francisco, New Orleans, Boston, and Washington, D.C., and he has done business in 25 states and 20 countries. He is a lay leader in the Episcopal Church and published a book on pastoral leadership transitions that has reached every diocese in the church. He earned his AB with honors from Duke University and an MBA from Harvard. He's a continuous learner and has completed executive education programs at both Stanford and Harvard. Van has been married 32 years to Brenda Sheets, a fashion designer, equestrian, and DIY do-it-yourself expert. They live in Dallas, Texas, and have 3 young professional daughters. And also I add that Van, I'm happy to say, and honored to say, is my brother. Welcome, Van. We're so happy you're here, and thank you for taking the time.
I'm happy to be here. I don't think Mom could have done it better herself.
Mom will be happy that we're doing this, and she'll hear it hopefully shortly. So, wow, having grown up with you, obviously, I know there's a lot to dive into. And I know your journey is a unique one where you've never deterred in a challenge or never, walked away from a challenge. So can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. We grew up in a warm, supportive family in a small town, and I think importantly in a large extended family with a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins who were diverse then and are quite diverse now. And I think that was a great foundation that I didn't understand then, but I think it became great preparation for meeting all sorts of people through life. And I think growing up in a small town gave me some advantages that fewer and fewer kids now get as we're more urbanized, that in a small town, everybody mixes with everybody. And I think that's great preparation for working with people. Since then, I've had a short attention span and bounced a lot of things.
I don't know if that's what I'd say, but like I said, you always meet a challenge.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned the family part, and I do think that's so true. I think Mom and Dad raised us to appreciate every person, every walk of life, diversity. We were the home that would open itself up to travelers coming through from various organizations, and we were also encouraged to go out and see the world. And I think in all of that, like you said, maybe we didn't appreciate it at the time, but they instilled it in us huge desire for learning and getting to know other people and trying our hand at things. You have been in so many different types of businesses in the profit and nonprofit world and in between, including early education organizations serving disadvantaged children. How did you end up working in such a wide range of organizations, and what would you say you've learned from all that?
Wow. I'm a little skeptical when people look back on a career and speak as if it were all planned in the high school guidance counselor's office or something. I think it's more a series of of binary decisions. Do I stay at what I'm doing? Do I go to this new thing, this new opportunity that came along? And I think because of my curiosity, I've maybe more times been inclined to take the go option or to jump to the next steep learning curve rather than stay on the learning curve that I was on that had maybe flattened a little bit. So I think that inclination is the reason for that, combined with living long enough, is the reason for having done a good handful of different things. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, you said some things, and you're my brother, but I never know what we're going to say to each other, and I'm always curious to get your viewpoint, and I will let our listeners know he's been an advisor to me on multiple levels through the years. So you mentioned some, I think, very important words in this entrepreneurship journey, because every entrepreneur, I think, probably has that curiosity, that looking for opportunities. And then once you find the opportunities, even if you don't know they're there yet, saying yes. I think those are important. It's that risk and not knowing what's there, but saying yes.
Well, yeah, I think it's always a managed risk. It's not jumping into complete unknown, but saying I've got certain things, to experiences or knowledge to lever off of in this next thing. But if I think of my experience, I have been in a CEO role in, I guess, 8 organizations, although 2 or 3 of them were pretty small. So CEO sounds a little bit too grandiose to describe it. But the longest that I stayed in one was, since leaving college, was 14 years. And that was a petrochemical business where I was the CEO for 9 years, and then began a transition to working on the board and being a half step removed. And I think after 9 years in that particular industry, my learning curve had flattened, and maybe there was some risk of me holding back other people. If I was there doing my role in the business, other people didn't get to grow into that role, one of them into that role and others into new roles. And so it felt like the right time to transition out. Maybe in a different industry, 9 years would have been too short, and I would have been in it longer. Or maybe in some other industry, it would have been shorter. But that was a time that I definitely felt like I needed a change, and that the organization needed me to make a change for its own continued growth. And it worked out great for me, and it worked out great for the organization. And I continued to be involved for a few more years and still stay in touch with people from there. But some other places, it's been a little bit quicker for one reason or another. And now at a different stage in my career, having done that a lot, I'm more interested in things that might be a little bit shorter. The last one I did was sort of an interim. Last 2 were sort of interim CEO things, where I had to learn a lot in a hurry, but I didn't assume that I was going to be in it 20 years. I'm too old to assume that I'm going to be in it 20 years.
We're not talking about age on this now.
Okay.
You know, I'm curious, because I think you said something that resonates with me, and I'm always curious, the mind of an entrepreneur. And before you and I get into my next question, a little offshoot, what goes through your mind? When do you feel that enough is enough? How does, as an entrepreneur, what goes through the mindset of assessing and knowing?
Well, I think it's hard to answer that without saying what is an entrepreneurial mindset. But I think one of the main traits of an entrepreneur is curiosity, and a love of learning, and a love of practical learning, not just to know things to know them, but know them to use them. And I think all of us find times in life in various endeavors that we feel we're repeating ourselves. And for a moment, there's great satisfaction, because when you repeat yourself, maybe you're really good at it the second or the 10th time, and that feels good. But it quickly feels less satisfying too, boring.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, usually it means if you're repeating yourself, somebody else isn't getting to grow into a new role. But
I think that's important. You're right. Yeah, you acknowledge that you have this knowledge base and you've shared with others, but I think you're right. We have to allow others opportunities as well. And I think a good entrepreneur is doing that all along. You start something and you grow people with you.
Well, I think the most gratifying thing for a manager, I think, is to see people grow in their roles, or to be a persuader and occasionally hear someone else say something as if it's original, and to think to yourself, oh, I've been hoping that idea would show up there a long time ago, or that it would get there quickly. And that's great when it does. And it's even better when somebody comes up with an idea that I haven't had, but that I helped them have.
No, that's right. That's equally exciting. And then you're doing your job well, I guess, if you're able to encourage others to grow. So we at EntreEd talk a lot about the entrepreneurship as a mindset, a critical thinking mindset and life skill set. Would you agree that it is a mindset to be an entrepreneur?
I think so. I'll tell you what I think the entrepreneurial mindset is, and then maybe you tell me if you agree. But I think it starts with being able to see the organization's service or its product through the eyes of the customer or the user, or if it's healthcare, the patient, or if it's education, the learner, and so on. But to see it through the recipient's perspective, and then the next part of the mindset perhaps is to feel compelled to make it better, and make that the experience of that service or product better. A lot of times people in business entrepreneurship say that they're solving a problem or removing a pain point, is the language, but that can be an ongoing way of thinking, how to make it better, and how do I imagine it being really great. And some of the most remarkable entrepreneurs imagined things that customers wanted and didn't even know they wanted.
Right.
Steve Jobs certainly did that with some of his design work at Apple and Pixar. And Henry Ford famously said, if I had asked my customer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Yeah.
And
I love those images when you see like cities in New York and the horse and buggy on the street, and then you see a few more, another decade, and then the car came out, and then continues to grow, and that whole. You're right. Just coming up with an idea and moving it forward, and people will come.
Yeah, but imagining what would be valuable to the user, to the customer, to the learner, to the patient. I think that's part of the mindset. I think another part of the mindset is to be, along with the curiosity, to be unafraid of where it leads. And
okay,
sometimes
and expand on that in that way, because tell me more about that.
Well, I think that it's easy to form what you think is the answer to something, and then the inquiry into it leads somewhere else. And so the curiosity has to be open-minded, not subject to confirmation bias and trying to see the answer I already had in every piece of information, but to say the data is going to tell me where we go, and what's good for the customer may be different than what I was thinking originally. And that requires a mindset of sort of open-mindedness, intellectual humility.
That's a good point.
I don't have the answer, and the answer can come from surprising places and surprising people. But I think that's maybe rarer than most other parts of the entrepreneurial mindset. It's much easier for most of us most of the time to say we've got an answer and everything else is going to confirm that it was the right answer, even when more objectivity would suggest that it's not.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely true. And, I think the word humility is an interesting one, and you're right. I never really thought about it on that level, but I'm big on questioning. I feel like if we don't ask questions, we'll never know. And
ask questions and actually want answers, and honor people who ask questions as much as people who bring answers. And an interesting company that actually talks about intellectual humility as part of its corporate culture is Koch Industries, which is sometimes at the center of controversial political discussions. The business founded by Charles and David Koch has been incredibly successful in entrepreneurship, and one reason is that it's part of the culture and the rules of the organization to be intellectually humble, and they actually give decision authority based on people's results rather than their titles, which is a fascinating concept.
it creates a sense of teamwork, collaboration, and wanting, I think, to be a part of it. I didn't realize that about them.
Yeah, well, I've done business with them a couple times in my career, and negotiated across the table, but sort of respected them as somebody to do business with. And if I think of the companies I've worked with over the years, maybe there's a pattern. I mean, I don't mean ones that I've been inside the organization, but where I've bought something from them or sold something to them or something like, or partnered with them. Some of the ones that are most successful in their fields, their industries, and biggest have some very positive things going on in their culture and their management practices. And even ones that sometimes are controversial for one reason or another are successful because they're doing some things right. Having worked with Koch Industries, I respected some things they did. I've worked with several of the largest oil companies in the world, and same thing there. Usually they are well managed and good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And I think you can look at technology companies, and they're faster products and service cycles there. And so if they're good, they get big in a hurry, and if they're not, they disappear in a hurry. In heavy industry, that takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Slower.
Yeah. You know, you and I, so we grew up in Western North Carolina, and EntreEd serves much under-resourced areas and persons. And so being in a small town, it wasn't, in my opinion, under-resourced, but as you mentioned, it certainly was place of opportunity, but also quite small to see the world and think about the world and what you could do in it. Who have been, do you have mentors along the way, or do you have some philosophies that have guided you from this small town to a very large world?
Well, I'll answer that. But first, let me say, I don't think the small town's that small.
Okay.
I think it was, I think when we were growing up, the town where we grew up was maybe 15,000 people. And yeah, that's small. You can know a pretty large cross-section of the town. It's hard to walk down the street and not see somebody you recognize. Or maybe it's analogous for a student to going to a mid-sized university. By senior year, you do recognize somebody when you're walking across the quad. But I think that people travel. It's not like an Amazonian village 100 years ago. In any small town in America, there are people who were out of town last week and some kind of experience. And unlike when we were children, there's the internet and mass media bringing the world in. So I don't think it's limiting. I think it, in some interesting ways, probably more limitations in my mind in suburban bubbles, in professional class suburban bubbles around the leading cities than there are in small towns. And I now spend a fair number of weeks every year in the outskirts of a town of 900 in Colorado, and I don't feel isolated there. And the people I get in conversations with at the grocery store or the pizza place are totally connected to the world. I don't feel a difference in talking with them than if I go to the coffee shop down the street from my primary home, which is in an urban area with a population close to North Carolina's.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, we work a lot with community colleges, of course. And I remember my own college decision, and you were helping to guide me. You reminded me whether I'm at a small college, it could have been a community college or a small college or a large university, you're still going to find your tribe. And that tribe may not be any bigger in any one of those places.
You're going to find your tribe and you're going to find your mentors. And to your question, I think if a mentor is someone who guides and you learn from, and perhaps somebody who helps you learn practical things or how to apply knowledge from the abstract to practical applications. And for me, certainly, parents and grandparents were at the top of that list, and a couple of high school teachers who pushed me with extra assignments, and then some of my early bosses in my career, and not just the good ones. A couple of my first bosses, whom I worked for when they were 30 years old or something, went on to be CEOs of huge organizations. And so obviously they had great skills, and I thought they had great skills then, and then later the whole world knew that. But also a couple of them who were pretty dreadful. I think I learned a lot from. Hopefully I wasn't learning to do what they did, but I was seeing the consequences of what they did and saying, I'll never do that. And I think that a good learner learns from everybody. In fact, I know it's in the monastic tradition that monks typically would say I'm talking about Christian monks, Anglican or Catholic usually, would say that if you meet somebody who's kind of irritating, you call that person a teacher. There's something that you can learn from them. So,
well, the intellectual humility. I mean, you may not, like you said, you weren't looking for it, but it's a life lesson on some level.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So as a business leader, we talked about the curiosity, the opportunities. What are some of the things you look for that you value most in your colleagues, that you find characteristics that you're looking for in your hiring people?
Mm-hmm.
What do you?
I'm laughing because there are a handful of sports coaches, I think this is attributed to, that recruit good athletes and then figure out the positions later rather than recruiting people with very position-specific skills. But I think things that define a good athlete in an organization would be drive, a strong desire to accomplish things, and that means accomplish things that are measurable, and integrity maybe is number one, and intelligence, and of course that can take different forms. In certain positions, the type of intelligence called for in someone who is a good coach or a good music teacher is different than a researcher in theoretical physics or something, but they're different. Each role has a kind of intelligence. Curiosity, I've mentioned before. I think intelligence without curiosity is kind of wasted. I think it was Warren Buffett who had a great line that he had similar things on his list, and he said on the integrity, he said, if you get the drive and the intelligence, you want the integrity, because otherwise the first two will kill you.
That makes sense. Yeah. Gotta love Warren Buffett.
Those are but integrity, drive, intelligence, curiosity, I think are the foundation of a good athlete in an organization.
I like that term. There's a lot that we've been learning, not just the COVID crisis, but just in general, what employers are asking for, and the types of things you're mentioning folks like Seth Godin and others would say those are soft skills that become hard skills. What do you think about that? Because the whole point of entrepreneurship education is how do we teach kids to have that critical thinking, to have that curiosity? And
oh wow, that's a hard question, and I'm not sure I understand the soft to hard. I think that integrity to me is not a skill; it's a way of being, and so it's a little more fundamental than a skill. And drive probably is too, and intelligence probably is largely heritable, and then a little bit worked on after that. Or at least that's what the brain research seems to show. Curiosity maybe is a mindset. But I think if you have those things, then you try to build your toolkit. And the toolkit has got a mix of hard and soft skills. A soft skill maybe is EQ, emotional intelligence, and that's using your mind and your heart to be alert to what other people are feeling, whether those are your colleagues or your customers or whoever. That's a soft one, but a hard one might be analytics. I think every high school student needs to learn statistics, and I guess most of our math programs I don't know why they go through this system of geometry, algebra 1, algebra 2, trigonometry, calculus. Some of that stuff you can use, but statistics you can for sure use. And so I would let more people get out of high school without knowing what sine and cosine are, but knowing what mean and mode and normal distribution are. But I use that as an example of a hard skill. And,
no, I agree.
And if you need to know statistics for what you're going to accomplish, which is true in a lot of fields, no amount of soft skills will overcome a not understanding statistics. You need both.
Yeah, no. And if not, you better hire somebody that's really got that skill, and they can help you with it, I guess.
Yeah. I think in any field, it's important to get the fundamental domain knowledge and the underlying intellectual tools to acquire the domain knowledge. So in a lot of fields, you need some statistics to understand. You can't become a doctor without knowing some statistics. You can't do marketing without it. And I don't mean to just harp on statistics, but I use it as an example. You can't practice medicine without certain understanding of organic chemistry and of molecular biology. So I don't know any shortcuts to that stuff. You have to have it. And I think every field has those things and that are required. And I think my impression, I don't study this like you do, but my impression is in entrepreneurship, there are a lot of people who don't appreciate those enough. And one place that I see it a lot is with marketers who don't understand fundamentals of marketing, but then rush to say, here's how you should use social media for marketing or whatever. They sort of learn the surface task without the underlying principles.
No, I totally agree. I think, what the word that you use is really applicable is there are no shortcuts. I think, being an entrepreneur is hard work and it takes a lot of knowledge seeking and a lot of trial and error. Everybody that we've talked to will say, I failed and then I succeeded, or I maybe failed, succeeded, failed, goes back and forth. But you can't do anything, I think, without that drive for knowledge.
Well, yeah, you have to say what's required to know to be able to do this. What are the underlying skills or capabilities I have to have? So if I'm going to become an X, do I need to study a particular branch of chemistry first to have the foundation? Or if I'm going to do a certain thing in a sport, do I have to have a certain kind of training so that I have the balance or the strength or the endurance before I can go far in the specific task?
So, I've mentioned you're my brother, honored that to call you my brother, and you've certainly been one of my advisors. And
you don't have a choice to call me that.
I say that without any like four-letter explicatives with it.
Yeah.
So what, you've been to different, you've had different educations, but you've raised daughters in both private and public education. We went to public school all growing up through 12th grade. What advice would you give to both teachers and maybe student learners in their own educational journey?
Wow, well, I think there are different sets. To the students, I think it helps to always imagine how you're going to use what you're learning. And I think there are a lot of frustrating moments, or there were for me as a student, to occasionally do something and think, I don't know how I'll use this. But I think most things are practical sometime. And I memorized some poetry in high school, and it's actually helped a couple of times. I didn't expect it then that it was going to help in a relationship, but it maybe helped in understanding the world. And I was too immature in high school to appreciate that it would do that. But I think in skills, once somebody's at the college level, it's a little bit easier to say, I might use this math skill because I next am going to pick up that science knowledge that lets me work in such and such field. And so you can sort of see it as part of a building block. Some of it is just learning to organize your mind. And I always enjoy when something comes back that I learned and it's sort of maybe not forgotten, but stuck in the back of my mind. I learned, I took a course in military history in college, and just because it was interesting, not because it was practical, but a few years later, I found myself on a ferry across the English Channel with a retired military officer, and the fact that we both could diagram one of Napoleon's battles on a napkin got me a free drink. So you never know when something's going to be practical.
Well, you and I, just a side note, I had the pleasure of traveling with my brother to Greece, and same in it was a college course I had in Greek mythology, maybe high school. It was interesting. Never thought I'd use it. And they were seeing these incredible historic sites, and all the stories came flooding back in. It was, making those connections. It was so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe that wires the brain a little bit, which is a kind of preparation in itself. But I'm fascinated now by possible changes in education. The pandemic is disrupting a lot of life, and I think education is at least as much as any other area. I think there's enormous disruption happening in tertiary education and a fair amount in K through 12 in preschool. But one trend that I would bet that we see more of is more short courses and short certifications as an alternative to degrees that take longer. And the short courses may be easier to go in and out of for a lifetime.
And I think that speaks to the entrepreneur. Learning a lot of different levels.
Yeah, saying this is what I need. I need to learn such and such, and I'm going to take an online course from Coursera or Lenda or edX or wherever. But there are more and more opportunities for that. Mm-hmm. And the learning, teaching and learning pedagogy is far from figured out, but I think it's moving along pretty fast, probably more in the corporate learning space than in the pure university. But finances are going to make universities figure it out pretty fast to survive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you see an opportunity in terms of with teachers and their opportunity to help change things?
Oh, for sure. I think teachers, and plenty are already doing this, are figuring out new ways to help students learn. And we lose something in technological shifts. For example, the teachers who have taught via Zoom for the last 3 months, it's harder. You can't see the faces in the same way or read the body language in the same way. But on the other hand, that technology may make it easier to do individual assessments of where students are. And it's it's beyond my grasp of the subject to get into which things can be done well by asynchronous online versus synchronous online learning and so on. But I think we're now in a massive societal exploration of that. And so if I were a teacher, I would dive right in and say, I'm going to pick something that I think I can make work for students and do it and experiment my way into it, because I don't think we'll deliver learning the same way again. Mm-hmm. This time may be as transformative as a few years ago when the classroom flip was beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot to think about. You certainly give me a lot of new things to write about, to think about, to talk about. The organization's I might be doing some blogging, and so certainly going to use your little nuggets here to spin off, if that's okay. Anything else you want to add to our conversation? It's fun. I love talking to you and always learn things new.
Well, I don't know. One thing I'm trying to do personally, while my routines are interrupted by the virus, it let me have more time for some things I wanted time for, because there were things that I needed to say no to, and it made it easier to say no to them. And there are things I'd like to do, but I can't right now, so I just have to put them aside and not worry about it. But I have tried to challenge myself to pick a couple of things that are just really hard and see if I can learn them.
I love that.
For the experience of it. I think this time of sheltering in place provides opportunities for that.
And as I said, you've never deterred from a challenge, and I would say that would be a challenge. Years ago, had the pleasure of living in Africa, and I read Anna Karenina because I'd never read one of Tolstoy's books, and I thought, you know what? When am I ever going to sit down and have a span of time to read something that long and that deep? And it was one of the best things I did that year.
There's a character in, what was her husband's name?
Oh my goodness, don't ask me.
And also Nicholas Nikolaevich or
something like that. A good Russian name.
Yeah, I'm forgetting, but Andre. Anyway, when Tolstoy introduces her husband early in the novel, he was a senior government official, a bureaucrat in the government in Moscow, and at that time all national governments were smaller, and probably all the senior governing people above a certain level knew each other and had dinner at the same men's clubs in Moscow. And the line that Tolstoy uses, or the paragraph to introduce him, says that he always chose his opinions like he chose his coats. He wore that which was in fashion. And
that's a good political statement for today.
That's the opposite of an entrepreneurial mindset.
So we may or may not keep that nugget. Van, thank you for taking your time. I know you're busy and we're on different time zones and things like that, but we really love having the business perspective on this show because I think business persons speak a lot to young students and can encourage them to find their own paths. So thank you.
Okay, well, my pleasure.
All right.
Success to your listeners.
Yeah, we'll let you know. Okay,
Bye.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.